Hello, I'm Josiah Jackson. I'll be covering the Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal. Okay. Richard Nixon, he was the 37th president of the United States. He served from 1972 1975, um, and he resigned on August 19th, 1974. But why did he resign? Well, he had a track record of being called Tricky Dick. For some reason, um, Nixon, well, first of all, for his campaign to get elected, he emphasized restoration of law and order in cities, crackdown on illegal drugs, that was a big thing for him, and an end to the draft. He promised to bring honorable peace in Vietnam, and he claimed to have a secret plan to end the war. Um, but if he is trying to do so much good, why do they call him Tricky Dick? Well, actually, he promised Vietnamization, which was to remove troops the from Vietnam, but in fact he intensified the war. Although he did bring troops home, he intensified the war and bombed Cambodia. He ran around 3,600 bombing runs and dropped like 100,000 tons of bombs. So he was kind of lying to the people. 1950, Senate elects Nixon. He ran against Helen Douglas, Hagen Douglas. Before he was president, he ran for Senate. And that's where he got the nickname Tricky Dick, because when he ran against Douglas, a New Age Democrat who had been a Broadway star in the 20s. He accused Douglas of being a communist, engaged in communist activity, because back then they were cracking down on communism. And it was enough to win him the seat and the nickname Tricky Dick. Yup. Watergate scandal. Nixon was paranoid, so he had a list of his enemies, which he had his special counsel Charles Colson assemble for him. And once he had that list, he created a group called the White House Plumbers, which was Howard Hunt, James McCord, Gordon Liddy, and Chuck Colson. And he had a bunch of Cuban exiles: Bernard Baker, Virgilio Gonzalez, Eugenio Martinez, Frank Sturgis, and they were all ran and organized by James McCord Jr., which was an ex-CIA. He was an ex-CIA guy. He worked directly under Liddy and Howard Hunt. So they faked. So the whole point of that was to sabotage Reagan's his competition, which they did, and things like the Canuck letter, which faked sabotage Edmund Muskie, which was an opponent for Richard Nixon, and that's what led them to break into the Watergate Hotel. It was the Democratic Party's headquarters. He was trying to get information on the Democratic Party and wiretap it so he could have an edge over them. The Cuban exiles broke into Watergate building, tapped phones, get critical information. Supervised by Gordon Liddy and Howard Hunt, they fulfilled their mission, but they got caught. A security guy catches them, McCord in the building, but once they're arrested, they're found in possession of address book that has Howard Hunt's name, which was tied to Creep and Richard Nixon. They found Jake McCord. He wasn't a thug. He was an exile, like I said, CIA, and head of security for Nixon's campaign. And they had one of the goons had a check from Creep, which threw up suspicions. And that leads into Nixon. He appoints the CIA to take over Watergate investigation because he had a lot of what's the word, influence over the CIA, like Patrick Gray, which he asked to destroy files connected to Howard Hunt and the Cuban exiles. So he was controlling the damage, minimizing the damage. But due to the persistence of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, they were head of media for the New York Times, and they were reporters. They kept harping on and making sure the media was updated with what was really going on. They even published some books. But ultimately, they're all indicted. All of John Liddy and Cuban exiles and McCord, they're indicted, and but yet Nixon's still not suspected yet. They were indicted for burglary, conspiracy, violation of federal wiretapping laws. But James McCord cracks before this. Howard Hunt asked for $1 million in hush money, so they were all paid. They were all paid off to plead guilty. Richard Nixon said in the tapes later on that were released later on from the Oval Office that I know where you can get $1 million, and it can be got in cash. That's paraphrased, but anyway. Conspiracy, violation of wiretapping laws because they broke into wiretap and steal records. They all pled guilty. But James McCord later admits to the judge, John Sirica, that he lied under pressure from higher-ups, and that many Richard Nixon's administration were involved. John Dean, Nixon's chief counselor, pressures Nixon to come clean about everything, and he doesn't. So he fires Dean, sorry. Dean's afraid of being made a scapegoat, so he didn't want to take the fall for anything on any of the bad dealings Nixon had. So he switches sides. He starts to talk to Federal Bureau of Investigation officers and leaking information. Patrick Gray resigns as chief of the FBI after it was revealed he destroyed Watergate sensitive documents, which Nixon had ordered him to, but no one knows that at the time. Special prosecutor Archibald Cox Senate began hearings that were televised after Dean comes clean about everything, about being he comes clean and testifies against Richard Nixon, and he said that he had discussed the Watergate cover-up at least 35 times with President Nixon. And Alexander Butterfield revealed that all Oval Office conversations recorded since 1970, but Nixon didn't want to hand over the tapes. So he did hand them over, but he handed them over with cuts. He handed them over highly sanitized and he didn't actually hand over the actual tapes, which was the problem. And that's when famously Senator Howard Baker gets the famous line, "What did the president know and when did he know it?" when they were trying to figure out what his involvement was. But ultimately, Nixon fires the head persecutor and hires a new one because Cox was getting too close or something. Leon Jaworski was hired. Ultimately, Nixon was found out after Leon Jaworski issued a subpoena to the White House for the unsanitized version. That's where you get Nixon United States v. Nixon. He took it all the way to Supreme Court, and they were released. And then Nixon resigns, and he quote, "I have never been a quitter, but as president, I must put the interests of America first," because this is when stuff in the Middle East was going on, and we were pulling out of Vietnam. So they wanted a full-time president, and he resigned. And yep, that's Watergate. Thank you.